Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. It's Barbara Van Allen, President of the Economic Club, and we'll get started in exactly 2 minutes. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the 568th meeting of the Economic Club of New York in our 113th year. I'm John Williams. I'm the chairman of the club, and I'm president and CEO of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. With a distinguished history back to 1907, the Economic Club of New York is the premier nonpartisan forum for timely discussions on a wide range of issues facing New York, the United States, and the world. Our mission is as important today as ever as we continue to bring people together as a catalyst for sharing diverse points of view. And particularly during these challenging times, we proudly stand with all communities seeking inclusion and mutual understanding. And to put these words into action, the club kicked off its Focus on Racial Equity series, where we've been leveraging our platform to bring together prominent thought leaders to help us explore and better understand the various dimensions of racial inequity and highlight strategies, best practices, and resources that the business community can use to be a force for change. We'll be cataloging, publishing, and sharing these insights broadly. Now, we are not doing this work alone, and would like to give special thanks to our corporate partners, Bloomberg, MasterCard, PayPal, Taconic Capital, and S&P Global, as well as the many members, the speakers, and subject matter experts that are now and will be engaged in this work. Before moving to our program, I'd like to take a moment to recognize those of our 312 members of the Centennial Society who are attending today, as their contributions continue to be the financial backbone of support for the club and help enable us to offer our wonderful, diverse programming both now and in the future. A special welcome to members of the Economic Club of New York 2020 class of fellows, a select group of rising next-gen business thought leaders, and make special note that applications for the 2021 class are now open. Any member interested in nominating a fellow can visit our website for more details. We'd also like to welcome graduate students from Rutgers University and the Gabelli School of Business at Fordham University. Now, it's an honor for me to introduce our special guests today, Dana Hammonds Shuler and Erik Coleman. Dana is the Senior Director of Player Affairs for the National Football League Players Association. She's responsible for the strategic design and management of programs and resources that help players transition into and throughout their playing careers. These programs include financial literacy and security, professional skill development, career counseling, continuing education, and wellness initiatives. A 31-year veteran of the NFLPA, Dana has served in numerous roles, including Director of Financial Programs, where she had direct oversight of the Financial Advisor Registration Program, and Legal Manager, where she administered a $110 million settlement fund for over 2,000 recipients. And it was during her tenure as a legal manager that she developed a passion for helping players preserve the wealth that they achieved during their playing careers. And her passion serving players and ensuring that they maximize the opportunities and wealth they achieved during to sustain a life of financial independence. And Erik Coleman is a 9-year NFL veteran, philanthropist, and sports analyst. After a stellar collegiate career as a captain of the Washington State football team, Erik was drafted in the 5th round by the New York Jets in 2004, played 9 seasons in the NFL with the Jets, the Falcons, and the Lions. And since his retirement in 2013, he's become a TV analyst for Jets Postgame Live, Jets Extra Point, Jets Nation, and the Jets Draft Show. So Erik is currently pursuing his passion for health and wellness, and an active philanthropist who supports a number of causes, including sickle cell anemia, pediatric cancer, and traumatic brain injury, and is a mentor for My Brother's Keeper mentorship program. So the format today is a conversation, and we're fortunate to have an Economic Club of New York member, New York Bureau Chief at Bloomberg and host of the Business of Sports podcast, Jason Kelly, who will be doing the honors. Now, we'll end promptly at 2:45, and any questions that were sent to the club from members were shared with Jason in advance. As a reminder, this conversation is on the record as we have media on the line. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jason.
John, thank you so much. Really nice to be with you virtually. Soon we will all be together again, especially with the big news that we're all knocking on wood about a very effective vaccine. So obviously putting on my Bloomberg hat, that is driving the market higher. It's also Monday, the day after a big Sunday of NFL football. And I'm just delighted to have Erik and Dana with me for this conversation. It's going to be wide ranging. We're going to talk about financial literacy. We're going to talk about a lot of the things that they've been personally working on what an incredible year it's been for these types of conversations around equality, around financial literacy, especially given all the crises that this country is facing. But I have to say, we got to start by talking about football, guys. I mean, after all, we are in the middle of the season. I have a senior person from the Players Association and a former player and analyst. So, Dana, I'm going to start with you if I can. Tell me how you feel like the season is going so far from where you sit.
Well, Jason, I'm going to talk about this more from a business perspective.
Right.
I'll keep it a bit neutral. I'm not going to complain or even talk about the team that I would generally root for.
You're joining us from Washington, I should point out. I'm just going to put that out.
But, again, from a business perspective, I think we're doing a great job. I mean, we're halfway through the season. We are very excited about that. And I mean, we have worked tirelessly to get to this point. And so, I kind of feel like now while I'm watching the games, I'm like, they're playing. I really don't care who's winning or losing right now. They're playing. And I'm just happy for that.
And what do you think, before I move to Erik, what do you think were some of the most critical decisions that you guys made from a Players Association perspective, from a business perspective, to ensure we could get to this?
Yes. Our goal is to really ensure the player safety. And we convened a group of medical experts along with, players, and we've been working with the league to make sure that we have the best practices and protocols in place to ensure that there is a safe environment for players. Now, admittedly, there have been a couple of outbreaks and breaches in protocol, but, again, we're still moving forward. I am hopefully optimistic that we will make it through the entire season. So, I really have to, just give thanks to, to our medical experts for, all of the advice and counseling, and to the players for adhering to the protocols as well.
So, Erik, talk to me about what you've seen, because you come at this from a number of different perspectives, as a business person, as an analyst, as John rightly pointed out, as a former player, as someone who I'm sure is talking to people in the league all the time. What has your thought process been, and what are the observations that you would make about the season so far?
Well, so far, I think the season has been a great success. I think that we all expected to have a few hiccups down the line, with some cases around there's a lot of people, there's a lot of players and staff that are involved in making this game go. But, just like Dana said, I have to give a lot of credit to the medical experts, the coaching staff, the players, everyone involved in keeping this game going, because it is an important game for our country. It's great for the morale of our country, and it's great to see the players out there playing. They may not have a lot of fans at the stadiums, but I think if you watch it on television, it's been quite the success. We've had some great games. I think it's just healthy to keep this thing going. There's a lot of players that opted out of playing, but there's a lot of players that also made that commitment that they're going to think not just about themselves, but about their teammates and the rest of the players around the league. And everyone's made a lot of sacrifices to keep this game going. And I think it's been a great success so far.
Yeah, it's been interesting, Erik, because as you say, there aren't as many fans in the stands. There's no tailgating. There's none of that stuff going on. There's almost more pressure on someone like you, I feel like, to make sure that, you're telling us everything that's happening. How has it changed your perspective, your job, as it were, or has it?
Well, it really has. I think the role of the analyst has really changed with the COVID situation. There's no fans that are at the game, so they're relying on our analysis, our opinion, and the background stories and what's going on at practice, because they can't be there. So I think it's even more important for sports analysts, broadcasters to create that picture for the fans, to give them that inside scoop, that perspective from a former player, from a person in the locker room that the fans won't be able to get this year. But, overall, I think the NFL has done a fantastic job. The PA, the NFL, the broadcast teams, everyone has really done a great job of making this intimate situation and able to still give the fans that great perspective.
And so, Dana, as you think about not just the season, but this year, 2020, good grief. It has just been something that none of us ever expected in our lifetimes, and not just around this global health crisis, but obviously everything we saw this summer, really ignited in many ways by the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis, and what came after that. Frame that for me through the lens of player empowerment, because we are, and the three of us were talking about this as we prep for this, we're so far beyond, to use a phrase that is attributed to another sport, we're well beyond shut up and dribble at this point. There is an expectation, there is an understanding that players are going to speak out. How do you manage that? And what does it mean that players do feel more empowered from the Players Association perspective? And then we'll get it from a former player.
I am excited about this. I am very excited to see players actually leverage their platform and to be courageous and to step out with such passion around the various events that have occurred. George Floyd, being just one, but, obviously, just so many different things that have occurred over the course of this year. And to see them to really come together and obviously, quite frankly, to be selfless, in this respect. This is something that it really, really gets me excited. We launched a campaign last year. It's called Athlete and we did this because we wanted players to be able to showcase who they are underneath the helmet. And to have players really taking advantage of this movement and showing that, they are an athlete and an advocate. That to me is huge. And it just gives them such a greater stage to really, really help their communities.
And do you feel like the league itself has come along with you and the teams have come along with you in this journey, maybe in a more accelerated way this year? Is that fair to say? I
think so. I really do. Change may be difficult, but it's necessary. And, I think we were all forced to really just sit back, take a step back, listen to what the players were actually saying to us and not just give it lip service. It's okay to say, okay, yeah, we'll let you, go ahead, talk or protest, but let's get together and put together some actionable items so that we can support them in these endeavors so that we can begin to make change. And I applaud them. I look at them as the heroes that are going out here, and they are true change makers.
So Erik, tell me about that from your perspective, as someone who is in the league, as someone, as I alluded to earlier, I know you're talking to your former teammates and current players and current coaches and team officials all the time. This was a big moment for the NFL. Especially if we think about the last 4 or 5 years and this rapid evolution, as it were. Are we right to be positive at this point? What have you seen, and especially based on your own experience?
Well, I do think we are right to be positive in this situation. I think that we've come a long way from players just kind of worrying about their own careers and staying in their lane, as people say, and come out and help some people who are in less fortunate situations than them. I think athletes are realizing that they have a voice, they have a platform. People listen to what they have to say, and they can make an impact in the community. I think that we've come a long way from, I remember when I was a rookie in the NFL, we used to have these fitness initiatives where I go to, different elementary schools and tell them to eat right and work out. And, it's kind of progressed from that to, education, financial awareness, social reckoning, so, recognizing social injustice and things of that order. But I think it's important to get these athletes out there for us to speak on things that we believe in, things that we are passionate about, because we are more than athletes. We come from communities that, my mother was a social worker, my father was a truck driver. Everyone has their own story. And I think it's important for players to get out and tell that story. I think it's important for players who've made it to the NFL to bring others up with them. I know that, in my life, I've had a tough upbringing, and the My Brother's Keeper program was one of those things where I was able to go back and talk to kids who, were affected by drug addiction, by violence in their lives. And for me to be an NFL player and to go talk to them and understand and tell them that I've been through what they're going through, it really did a lot for those kids, and it made an impact. And so they can see and touch a person who's been through what they've been through and come out successful. So, I think it's important for athletes, for entertainers, for everyone to come out and help those who don't have a voice that they do.
That's really interesting. We're going to come back to some of your background and sort of some of the choices you made, especially in your post-playing life and while you were a player, Erik. But before we do that, Dana, I do want to ask you, to Erik's point about, sort of taking a broader view, how do you put some structure around that? How do you institutionalize? You talked about, one of the programs, but how do you ensure that, this movement, this moment that we've all kind of coalesced around doesn't sort of fade away because we've got someone new in the White House or the health crisis abates or whatever that may be that changes people's perspective? How do you ensure that it sticks, for lack of a better term?
We've really tried to sort of help players galvanize, their efforts. And it's not been easy. We, sort of talked a little bit about this earlier today. As we were looking at some of the social justice initiatives, and then we were looking at some of our community initiatives, and we saw a lot of crossover. And we've begun to think, it's probably not in our best interest to separate the two, but to bring them together. And so we've, convened a group of individuals to go through and research the absolute best way to be impactful and resourceful, to players, so that we can continue to, to help them and to keep this movement going. I'm not at liberty to disclose what we are going to do because they've not told me yet. There will be a big reveal. I'm being told, within the next couple of weeks, but I'm, really excited because this team has really put a lot of time and energy, into this. And I'm just very passionate about making sure that we don't lose sight of, the big picture. And as the NFLPA, we want to be a part of that. We want to actually support players in these endeavors. And I always tell my staff all the time, look, we're going to make impact. This is never, ever about lip service. It has to be impactful. I'm excited to see what comes next.
Well, and it's interesting too, because you're touching on something that I think is really important, Dana, which is this notion that, we can't sort of separate the crises from each other to some extent, right? I mean, in the sense that, yes, it is a health crisis. Yes, there is a crisis of injustice and inequality, but, and keeping in mind that we are speaking to the Economic Club of New York, all of these are economic and financial crises in many ways. And so much of what we've learned this year, regardless of whether it's the health pandemic or a long overdue reckoning around inequality and racial injustice, these are economic crises in many ways. And so sort of taking a little bit of a turn into that, how do you view that lens, that financial, that economic lens, and how do you build it in a way that's ultimately effective for players?
Great question. We've we've been through this a little bit before in 2008. When the stock market crashed as a result of the housing crisis. And that was really, it was a pivotal point, I believe, for many of the players that we were working with. Once we sort of got here, in the midst of a pandemic, and, I began to take the same viewpoint that everyone's paying attention. Now is a great time and it's a great opportunity to do that gut check and to really begin to help players understand and prepare for the fallout or the impact from a pandemic. And how do we do that? We do that by, providing them with a litany of, resources that, that they can trust and that they can go to. But, instead of shying away from, what really is at stake, we just went straight to it. We quite honestly, we didn't think we were going to have a season, and we did not know what that meant without a season. Lots of, lost jobs, and it extends, further, from the players. So we're looking at all of that, and, we're really trying to figure out, how do we make this thing work? But my job was, great, how do we make it work? But in the meantime, if it doesn't, what do we do to help the guys to plan and to prepare? And we've been working with the players and their family members since the first week of April, hosting all types of webinars and offering all kinds of one-on-one sessions to just really help them navigate this, this pandemic, if you will, or this crisis. But I don't think that the work stops. It doesn't stop there. We continue, to do this. If anything, it just heightens your awareness. And it just lets you know that, okay, it shouldn't take a crisis for me to understand where I am financially and how to prepare. So, these services don't go away when the crisis goes away. They're always there. So hopefully it is a lesson, one that will spur positive change across the board.
We're going to talk a little bit more in a few minutes about sort of the financial literacy piece of this, not only for the players, but in the broader community. But Erik, I do want to go back to your background, because I think your story is an interesting one. You shared a little bit of it with us just a few minutes ago, but walk us through briefly sort of your journey, as it were, from a high school kid on, playing college football, getting to the league. You obviously are a very savvy businessman at this point. How was that something that was always in your mind, or was that something that you learned along the way? Help us understand that.
Okay, well, just a little bit about me. In high school, growing up in Spokane, Washington is where I was raised. Single parent. My mother raised my brother and I. My sister was a little older than us. She struggled with drug addiction, and that was always tough. Growing up and not having things that you wanted. And as I started to get recruited to different colleges to play football, my mother was taken to prison. My mother went to prison for a year and a half, I believe it was. And so I had to go on all these college trips by myself. I lived with some friends, and I lived with a family of friends, and they were Mormon. And the father was an attorney, and he really started to instill the structure in my life. I never had to come home and answer to someone and say, do you have homework? What is your grade on this test? And, I started to be held accountable. I had to get a job. I had to have responsibilities, chores around the house. These are all things that I never really had. And it kind of gave me something to shoot for. I always said to myself, I wanted to be like this. I want to have structure in my family. And so I went to Washington State University, wanted to become a police officer or FBI agent. Football kind of took off. And, I was fortunate to be drafted by the New York Jets and have the opportunity to play in the NFL. And through playing in the NFL, I met a lot of great people. I met, my player development director, Kevin Winston, when I was at New York. I became a union rep for my football team. And that's when I started to learn more about the education, the post-football situations that we had afforded to us. When I met my wife grew up in the restaurant industry. Her family owns a lot of restaurants in New York City and in Long Island. And, she started asking me questions like, what are you doing after you're done playing football? And at first I was like, what are you talking about? I'm in the NFL. I'm making this money. Why do I have to worry about after football? And then, she kept asking me like, what's going on? What's next? This isn't going to last forever. And along with, me going to all these union meetings and learning about the financial literacy programs, learning about the internship, the externship programs that they had in the NFLPA, all these things that made me take notice of, okay, I know that I'm more than a football player, but what am I? What am I going to do after I'm done with this? So the NFLPA had a program where we went and sat down with this headhunter for corporations, and we were going to get set up with different executives from different companies and learn about them. And I always said to myself, I know that I'm playing in the NFL and I'm making good money, but the people who are buying these suites, the people who live in my neighborhood, drive the same cars as me, they didn't have the skills to play in the NFL. What are they doing to make money? And I was always a curious person, and I always, asked them. I asked for, how did you get here? Why did you go the path that you did? Can you tell me a little bit about your business? And that interest kind of just sparked something in me that I know this is going to end. I need to learn about life after football, learn about business life, because when I'm done playing football, I've been playing 9 years. I've been playing the game for 9 years, and these people have a 9-year head start on me. I have some catching up to do. So, it was a combination of seeing what I wanted out of life, having the answer to my wife, and have a educated answer of what I want to do. I'm 31 years old when I'm done playing football. I have a lot of life to live. So, and then along with the tools from the NFLPA, all those things kind of collaborated in one thing and forced me to come out of my shell as an athlete and learn more about life.
So we're going to come back to what you've done post NFL, but Dana, I have to ask you, I have to imagine, everybody's story is unique, and Erik did such a nice job of telling us his, but that attitude presumably that he had of, listen, I'm in the league, I made it to the show, like, what do I need to worry about? I have to think that even today, that's pretty pervasive. Tell me about that.
It is, unfortunately. And quite honestly, I believe that sometimes players have to have a certain amount of bravado. I cannot even imagine going out on the field and running full speed into someone, and in the back of my mind thinking, I should be thinking about what's next. It's like, no, I have a job to accomplish right now. I'll think about that later. And so, our job is really to try to help guys have the ability to compartmentalize as much as possible. And again, we see that a lot, but we're really just trying to tap into that, what's next, what else? And, how can we, be of assistance here? So that, some of the stories.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, Dana, it feels like the Players Association and the league to a certain extent, and probably even individual teams and owners, they have gotten more sophisticated along the lines. Along these lines, and as was pointed out earlier, you've had a long career there at the NFLPA. What were sort of, you mentioned the financial crisis, but what were some of the other moments that you really felt like, oh, okay, we should be doing this? Were there programs, were there things along the way where you found out, I'm thinking of a program that I believe I read about where you guys did externships, and Erik mentioned sort of mentors outside. It feels like creating that connectivity must be a critical part of this, right?
It really is. And we rely on players. We get a lot of our insights from players. We get a lot of insights from what some of the, the other sports leagues are doing across the world. The externship is a program, that we've operated. I believe we're going into our 10th year, and it's been phenomenal to expose players to careers outside of sports. And last year, we actually took a couple of guys to London and gave them a view of what it's like to work in sports marketing abroad. just, I mean, to really open up, someone's eyes, and then to provide them with a network of individuals that can help them, once they do decide to move on to that second career. But, more often than not, we're getting a lot of our insights from the players themselves. We do this thing, it's called the 5 whys. And it's like, well, why? Why do you want this? And so we're just really trying to drill down to figure out, what is it that you want? And then, once we get our insights, we design around that. And I truly believe that's why we've had so much success with, all of the programs that we have. We branched out from the externship to do more, we call them career conversations, which is, a take on informational interviews, and, our global job shadow. And all of these really with the intent of providing the players with as much experience and exposure as possible to allow them to make these decisions, about what's next. And it's been a great journey to see guys really embrace this and, and take advantage of, all of these programs. I mean, look at Erik, stunning example here of, of someone. I wish we could take full credit for it, but I mean,
and his wife a lot of credit on this one.
And his wife,
based on what he said.
Absolutely.
So Erik, let's talk about that if we can, because you do make that decision at some point to retire, and you have to figure out what's next. I believe you had a degree in communications from Washington State, so maybe that provided at least a window into what you might do. But how do you end up as an analyst?
Well, that was a long fight that I actually had with my wife, because when I was done playing football, I don't know if you realize this, but a lot of NFL players, basketball players, a lot of us don't get to retire. You end up, we call it getting fired, where you're released from your team and there's no longer an opportunity for you to play. And, of course, having the bravado that you have to have as an NFL player, I'm like, I can still play, I'm not out there playing. And so my wife's like, Erik, you should be an analyst. You should talk about football. You were a safety, you were the communicator on defense. You know a lot about this game. And at the time where I was done, I said, you know what, I'm done with football. I don't want anything to do with football. I'm going to go have success in the business world and, make football jealous of what I did in the business world. And as I got into the business world, some of the relationships that I made with the Jets as a rookie came back full circle when I moved to Long Island. And, they told me there's an opportunity to go on a show, talk about football, analyze the Jets. And I said, okay, I'll give it a try. And I went and did one show. I came back and my face was just like gleaming. And my wife said, you liked it, didn't you? And I said, yeah, I did like it. So I went back the next week, and then they offered me the job for the season, and it's kind of taken off from there. But, it's great for me because I get to stay attached to a game that I love, that has done so much for me. I get to talk about it, educate people with that game. And, it keeps my name out there. It keeps me relative out in the business world, and helps with relationships. So, it's kind of been a win-win for me and my family. Football is that gift that just continues to give.
And so, Dana, I want to shift the conversation, if we can, to something that Erik also mentioned earlier, which is sort of the community aspect, the broader community aspect. How do you, once players, it's one thing if they've sort of moved on to another successful career as Erik has, but even when they're playing and after they're playing, there is increasingly an expectation, just in the same way that we talked about, player empowerment, of speaking out on certain issues, of being an important part of the community. How do you ensure that they're doing that in the right way? And you talked a little bit about this earlier, and it sounds like we're going to hear even more about this in the next couple of weeks. But tell us a little bit more about how you sort of walk that line of saying, listen, to whom much is given, much is expected, and you guys need to give back to either the team in the community, or the community of the team in which you're playing, or maybe even where you grew up. How do you sort of institutionalize that?
Yeah. Again, we are really a player-led union, very unique in terms of, what we do. So our our role or our involvement in this is really more about what our members wanted
Right.
versus us going out and telling them what they should do. Although because we are really huge proponents of financial literacy, um, being great stewards, being philanthropists, it just, when I talk about financial literacy and wellness, it does, all types of things in terms of how you feel. And it just, they say it's almost like a drug, and it just, really makes you feel great. But aside from that, we were really taking our marching orders from players and then also listening and paying attention to all of the different things that they were getting involved in. We're using our expertise to really help them to build out some of the initiatives that that they have. I'll use Brandon Copeland as an example. Brandon was running a football camp, as many players often do, and we wanted to give Brandon an award for being a champion of financial literacy. And we're trying to figure out, well, how do you do this, to celebrate him, but not necessarily for the community efforts, but for him being a champion in financial literacy. And so we talked a lot about what he does at his camps and decided, well, what if you added a component to your camp that included financial education workshops for the parents?
Mm.
And he's like, oh man, great idea. This is awesome. And so, we are really, just trying to help amplify the guys' platforms and their messages, and really helping them to make an impact in the community. And so whether we are offering them access to our partners that would provide them with additional goods or services, or just having these conversations with them to kind of point them in the right direction to help them make the right connections in order to be impactful, that's where we are. And it's just really a matter of really coordinating this so that more players are aware, of the services that we provide.
So Erik, tell us a little bit about how you sort of expand your role to the community. You talked about My Brother's Keeper. You and I also had a chance to visit a little bit ahead of this about your experience in Atlanta, my hometown, and we both have the great fortune, you more than I, of knowing Arthur Blank and sort of his community focus. That, I think about him, I think about Robert Kraft. I can't believe I'm talking about Robert Kraft and Arthur Blank at the same time. And if anybody says 28-3, I'm going to be very upset. But Erik, these are two owners who have really made this kind of part of the deal if you play for them. Tell us about what you learned from Arthur Blank and sort of how that has helped you sort of define how you want to help a community.
Well, playing for Mr. Blank and the Atlanta Falcons, coming into the organization, typically during a week in football, Tuesday is your day off. And, it was kind of on other teams and other systems that I played in, that's just your day off. That's your time to recoup, handle what you have to handle during the week. But when I got to the Falcons, Mr. Blank said, we all have enough time in each day to handle our personal affairs. Let's pick a day to give back to your community. And we had these days where on Tuesdays we'd go out in the community, and we'd come back on Wednesday at the meeting, and you would see the board of players what they had done in the community. This player went to this community center, this player went and read to kids. And it was kind of encouraging, and it made you feel good as a player, as a person, to go out and help others and to help your community. But taking the step forward, after I'm done playing football, I get a call from the NFLPA asking if I can come down to an event. And this is just one of the organizations that I'm a part of now. I went to the Children's Brain Tumor Foundation, their gala down in Manhattan. I was asked to go participate. I met some people there. It just created a great relationships. I had a passion. I met a lot of the kids. And, about a year and a half later, now I'm on the board for that foundation. And it just helps with, getting opportunities to get out there in the community, seeing other causes and what they're involved in. And it's really just become a culture around the league of helping and giving back. And it's just something that we're all proud of, being players.
And so, Erik, talk a little bit, if you can, about this notion of financial literacy and ultimately what it means for communities like the one where you came from, and communities that you've been a part of. As Dana rightly pointed out, it is this critical element that sometimes is overlooked. What are some things that you've picked up along the way? And then I'll ask the same to Dana in terms of things that we all can think about in terms of promoting financial literacy, which obviously is critical to broader society.
Well, I think we all have seen, the stories of athletes who have, gone broke after they're done playing. And it comes up with, coming into the league, you don't want to be broke. I don't want to end up like this. And I remember having players in the locker room, like, my rookie year, Curtis Martin. As soon as I got into the locker room, I started talking to him about what does he do off the field, and at first I was scared, as a player to think about doing things outside of football. But as you start talking to different players in your organization and through the players union, you meet players from other teams who have had a lot of success. Now it becomes, what can I do with my money? How can I enhance my career? Just a quick story. I got my first paycheck. John Abraham his locker was next to mine. And I remember seeing my check, and it was like $30,000 or something. And I remember being like, man, this is a lot of money, the most money I've ever had. And then John Abraham slaps his check in my chest, and it's like $450,000 for the same pay period. And I said, oh my goodness, I can't believe this. And he said, you know what that tells you, rookie? That tells you that you can't buy the same things that I can buy. You don't buy the same house. You make sure you stay in your lane. This money has to last you through your retirement. So you have to educate yourself, take care of your money, and treat it as if this is the last dollars that you're ever going to make. So, I think that, the financial literacy that you learn from players through the NFLPA with all these programs, it just helps you just realize that how important your money is. You put your body on the line for this money. You work so hard to get to this position. Why not make it last and live that great life, throughout the rest of after you're done playing?
So, Dana, I'm going to give the last word to you. What's the best advice that you give players, or maybe what's the most interesting thing you hear back from players in terms of this financial literacy question? Like, how do we all sort of get better based on what you've learned?
So one of the things that I feel has really helped, I had to sort of change the way that I thought and approached financial literacy with players, because it's boring, it's not sexy. And I approached it in terms of the business of me. And I talked to players like, I want you to think about yourself as this, whether it's a small business or a big business. And I want you to develop a relationship with people across all spectrums that serve as advisors, practice or establish best practices of running your business, whether that's from your brand to managing your money, because you want your business to thrive. You want to develop multiple streams of income so that if for whatever reason something happens and your income from one portion of your business diminishes, that you're okay otherwise. I want you to think about credit and how you use it and how you leverage it to continue to build your business. And then more importantly, think about generational wealth. And how do you take all of this? How do you establish the business of Erik Coleman to pass this on to the little Eriks that come behind you? And so it's really tapping into that entrepreneurial spirit and getting people to just embrace the fact that, okay, I am a business. I can run this. It's okay to seek advice. That's what most businesses do.
Right.
It's totally fine. And if I want my business to thrive, there are certain things that I need to do in order to be responsible and accountable. And so that's been my approach for the past 10 years.
Well, that's a great approach, and we're really grateful to you both for spending some time with us. Erik and Dana, thank you so much. Here's to the second half of a very successful NFL season, and we'll be looking for great news from both of you down the line. I'm going to hand it back over to John. Thank you both.
Well, thank you, Jason, and thank you, Dana and Eric. It's been a fascinating conversation. Thanks for sharing your perspectives, your time with us today. I really appreciate that. Looking ahead, I'm pleased to report that we have got a lot of great speakers lined up in coming weeks. As always, we encourage you to not only attend yourselves, but invite guests to our events. This Thursday, we got James Gorman, CEO of Morgan Stanley. We've got, in looking ahead to the following weeks, we've got Mark Zandi of Moody's, we got Jay Clayton, Chairman of the SEC, LL Cool J, Chief Executive Officer of Rock the Bells, and Melody Hobson, the co-CEO and president of Ariel Investments. As you can see, we've got a great lineup of speakers coming up, and we'll be adding more as that becomes available. So please keep checking our website, and we'll obviously communicate with members about with updates. So thanks again for joining us today, and have a terrific rest of your day.